For my EMA 4003 final project, I will be discussing cactus leather and its properties compared to those of traditional animal-based leather. So to start, a brief introduction to understand why it's important to consider alternatives to traditional leather. On top of all the environmental problems related to raising cattle on a large scale, it is also a fact that the tanning and manufacturing of leather has a large environmental impact that cannot be ignored. Leather production is catastrophic in terms of deforestation and biodiversity loss, as well as greenhouse gas emissions. Leather is extremely energy and water intensive to produce, while lots of chemicals unsafe for human exposure used in the tanning process are released onto waterways. On top of that, working in tanneries is very dangerous for the workers, especially those in developing countries where safety laws are lacking or not well enforced. So, to go a little deeper on the environmental demands of cow based leather, in order to understand how cow derived leather has almost 3 times the negative environmental impact as its synthetic counterparts, including polyurethane PU leather. So, these environmental demands can be understood in the following way. So, firstly, the cattle ranching demands. So, the Amazon rainforest is home to 200 million cattle, and cattle raising is the largest driver of Amazon deforestation. Additionally, 450,000 square kilometers of Brazilian rainforest is now barren and used for commercial pastures. Additionally, tanning-derived pollutants are also a major concern. Chromium tanned leather is the most popular form of producing leather for consumer goods, and one of the most harmful, needing a toxic slush of chromium, salts, and tanning liquor. Even in fully modernized tanneries, it is impossible to redeem all pollutants generated by the tanning processes, so they're released onto the air and onto water. So, wastewater pollution is primarily a byproduct of the initial preparation stage, where bits of flesh, hair, mold, excrement, and other animal byproducts are discarded into important bodies of water and waterways, such as the Ganges River. This is why considering alternatives to leather as a means to meet the demand for the material while reducing its negative consequences is so important. So, why plant based alternatives? So, as you can see in the diagram to the left, the environmental impact of animals versus synthetic leather is very, very small comparatively based on an analysis using its HIGG Material Sustainability Index, which takes into account metrics such as greenhouse gas emissions, eutrophication, water scarcity, resource depletion, and chemicals emitted. So, a brief definition. Plant-based vegan leathers are leathers where fruits, leaves, or other plant-based components are industrially processed together with stabilizers so that the final material can have the visual and tactile characteristics of animal leather. So they consist of a base material which is coated with one or multiple layers. In the base material, some of the structural synthetic raw materials are replaced with plant-based components, mainly cellulose. So for example, some synthetic PVC or PU coating can be replaced with agricultural waste products coming from apple, pineapple, and cactus. So why cactus is an alternative and why Deserto specifically? So Deserto, synthesized in Mexico by the Adreno Di Marti company, uses nopal cactus, which is Opunta ficus indica, which is a kind of cactus indigenous to Mexico, which is a natural carbon sink and has a great CO2 sequestering capacity, so it has low emissions. From 14 acres, it can absorb 8,100 tons of CO2 per year while only generating 15.3 tons. So nopal can grow in severely degraded soils that are inaccessible to other crops and can naturally regenerate soil so it is usable in other ways. Importantly, it only takes 200 liters of water to grow 1 kilogram of cactus biomass, compared to the average 1,000 liters needed to grow the same kilograms of other crops. This is because water is absorbed by the plant itself from humidity present in the atmosphere. It's efficient. It only takes 3 leaves of nopal to create 1 linear meter of Deserto leather. So as to the overall composition and structure of Deserto cactus leather, it's depicted in both the 3D model that I made and the diagram to the left, which shows like the simplified layers. So the typical composition of PUR coated artificial leather used for shoe or upholstery application is the one that is shown. So the support layer, which is the bottom layer, consists of a knitted or woven polyester textiles coated with foamed polyurethane-based middle layers that also contain organic fillers based on cellulose. The materials are finished with a polymer-based top coat, and the surfaces of the material were partly embossed to achieve the texture of leather. So in the model, you can see the textile support, which is a blue layer, the interwoven polyester with the cotton, the cellulose structures of the cacti, and the PVC spheres embossed all around in the middle foamed layer. So the 3D texture of the cellulose shows the embossing. And finally, the top coat, which is a polyurethane embossed top coat to have the texture of leather. So this overall structure of cow-based leather can be compared to what we previously saw. Again, the layer composition of the cow-based leather and the 3D model of the cow-based layer can show that it still reflects the structure of skin with a grain membrane, a papillary layer, a reticular layer, and the hair channels. So in the model, it can be seen that the hair channels have spaces on the upper layer, and the capillary layer can be seen on the tighter formed networks of capillaries, and the bottom layer would be the reticular layer. So again, this can be compared to figure B, which shows the overall structure of the Certo cactus leather with the support layer, foam cellulose structures, PVC, and top coat. So the properties of the Certo leather largely depend on the structure of the textile. So hybrid leathers offer very similar basic visual and tactile characteristics to those of leather. Therefore, synthetic components mostly serve as a stabilizer for the bio-based component, or to ensure that the qualitative requirements to which leather is subject can also be met. So currently, there are hardly any scientifically based studies comparing the mechanical properties based on common parameters in material science. So initial studies, however, show that the performance of any fake leather depends on the stability of the base material. So cactus leather can be processed like synthetic leather when stabilized with polyurethane and cotton. The tensile strength of coated textiles depends mainly on the properties of the supporting fabric. The results show a reasonable choice of fabric for the intended use of these engineered materials, regardless of the natural or artificial origin of the fabric fibers. This means that for the textile support bottom layer, you can use cotton or you can use polyester for similar results in tensile strength. So looking into the future, it's important to understand that the farming of the nopal cacti feedstock is the most eco-friendly part of the Certo leather, with a significant reduction in water, chemical, and carbon used in this stage of the supply chain. However, once the dried cactus enters factories, the truth about what chemicals are applied to turn it into a leather alternative is deliberately hidden to make it appear more sustainable than it is. What is evident is that the presence of restricted chemicals, especially chemicals typically found in PU, indicates that just like many other synthetic leathers, certain versions of the Certo are mainly made from plastic with some nopal cellulose added in. Although this largely reduces the negative consequences of the material, it's important to know that it's still mostly fossil fuel based polymers. So while there are several types of the Certo, all with differing degrees of cactus content, the environmental claims that are made by the company are only based on one version, meaning the life cycle assessment isn't representative of the full product range. So the Certo as an alternative is promising, but it needs further development to replace fossil fuel-based top coats with other protein-based layers that could still function as leather.